You're muted. Mm, 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 mm. You have no audio. You have no audio. I'll make a song up so it keeps people interested. Tom's working on his audio. You have no audio. You have no. You still have no audio. I can hear me though singing. Oh, he's gone, and now he's back.
Wow, that was weird.
Now you're there. It's here. Yeah.
All right. That's a good way to start. Let's get on the microphone. What about now?
Yep. I can hear you good.
And
And
this weekend. You blew me up. Welcome to This Week in Worcester podcast. I am Tom Marino, editor of This Week in Worcester. I am here with John Keogh, executive producer of Manny J Media. Round two of Hey John.
Hey Tom.
Well, we have a fun show today.
We're gonna argue. It's gonna be fun.
The first thing on our docket is you lowering your volume because you refuse to use any earpiece, and I can hear myself.
Oh, how about now?
How about now? Check 1, 2, check book, checkmate. Yeah, good enough. So the real first thing on our agenda today is the Worcester School Committee, and any of y'all listen can chime in anytime you want through the platform that the comments in the platform that you are using, and we'll address them as they come in. It's important that we respect public servants, right? And when you work for the city, or especially the school department, for 40 some years, you're a wonderful public servant and you deserve credit for that. But then when you enter elected life, when you run for an elected position and you advocate for time and time and time and time again how things used to be, how things were done in the past, how things were done when I was superintendent, for example, you invite scrutiny of what your performance was as superintendent. So I published a piece on Friday. We took a look at that. So the last budget meeting for to approve the budget that our current superintendent, Dr. Bonares, proposed to the school committee was on June 20th. Well, for over 6 hours, which isn't, all that abnormal happens. But things were hung up on the absolute most mundane thing. We had to talk 10 minutes about the reduction of one custodian from one school needed a 10-minute break, a 10-minute discussion. Because the former superintendent says, well, you really need 10 custodians at that school. Well, there was a $22 million budget deficit. They did add 2 custodians, but we have a new school coming online at Doherty that's massive, in case you haven't noticed.
Huge.
And so, with deficit plus custodian staff we had added 2, they reduced from 10 to 9 in the budget. They reduced the custodians at Worcester Technical, rather. And no, the former superintendent says you need 10 custodians. We had to stop for 10 minutes until what repeated itself time and time again throughout that meeting, 6-3 votes. Member Biancaria talking at length about nothing, and then member Roy, who doesn't say anything at all, voting with them. Rarely speaks during meetings. But probably the most infuriating part was,
I like Kathy, by the way. I just want to say that I like her.
I don't know. I met Ms. Benenda once. I've been in a room with Ms. Biancara. Never spoke with her. I never have even seen Ms. Roy live, so in person. So I don't know them at all. It's not really the relevant point here. But we're just gonna flip to a video real quick. Listen to some of the language in this.
So what I'm very concerned on this page is the culture and climate specialist. Again, people just roam the hallways.
Just roam the hallways.
My motion is that we cut the 21 new positions for climate and culture specialists.
So I'm just wondering, when we look at this dollar amount of 1,169,000, and they're all non-teaching positions. Again, let me repeat that, non-teaching positions. So we are having, and I get we need to have some security in our schools and students need to be in a classroom. But I also understand that these folks in these positions are going to be looking at school rules, regulations, procedures, and altercations. So we are looking at having glorified bouncers in our schools. And yes, they'll answer the door, and that's what a bouncer does at a nightclub. So we have no security guards. We don't have a plan with our police any longer. Those were eliminated. The security guard was eliminated. They were disbanded, actually. So now we have 1,000,001 for our schools. So I've been told a number of times that our schools are safe, but now we're putting in 4 to 5 people to roam the halls. But we're not going to have anyone in a uniform. We're not going to have anyone that is associated with our police department in our school, and we're not going to have any security guards in our schools. But we're going to have 5 people. Are they going to wear a vest? What is their dress code? I don't need an answer for that tonight. I'm just throwing that out there.
So this is how we talk about people who work for the Worcester school system from the school committee.
And by the way, these are not new positions. They're not new.
No, hold on. So they it sounds like, from what I could gather, is they piloted this last year, and they're adding 21 of the same position this year. So they're expanding it to other schools. That's right. In short, part of this, the part of the security effort, but they're there every day to engage with kids. They are part of the process. When a kid is having a behavior issue, they pull them out of the class. They're not counselors, but they work with kids. They build relationships with kids. There's also 5 of them in every school. So I like how we can't afford this, but we're going to put police officers in the schools. Nobody explained how they intend to pay for that. Because this isn't about policy.
This is the police are going to be less. It's going to be less money.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Because in the end, this is not about actual substance in the schools. This is about one person's revenge tour, a la Hillary Clinton in 2017, touring the country, blaming everybody but herself for losing. That's what's going on here.
So Manny and I interviewed the superintendent for the year-end interview, right? The report card for 2023, 2024. We were at Burncoat High, and we actually met some of the a couple of these folks in the hallways, and the check-in person for the school said to me and Manny at one point, "Thank God for these folks, because they kind of keep the hallways safer than they used to be." Now, this is not a criticism, but Burncoat for a long time was known as a school where there was a lot of fighting and there was a lot of things going on in the hallways. And so the first person that we ran into in the hallway said that they were grateful for these climate and control staff. So then, as we were walking down the hallway, because we had to walk around the U. If you've been in Burncoat High, there's a big U to get to certain classrooms. we saw what they were doing. And so what happens is the kids in between classes, they, like normal kids in high school, they like to hang out in the hallways, right? And so these staff, what they did was, as the kids were moving, they came kind of behind them and just kind of ushered them along into their classes. And they talked to the kids. They knew them by name. There was no physical contact of any kind. It was just encouragement. Hey, you're headed. Where are you going? You're going to the gym? Okay, that's cool. That's that way. And you're going to this class and that class. And it was just that kind of deal. I remember high school, and we did not have that person. That didn't exist. And so a lot of times kids didn't go to class. We would blow off class. We would go there. We would go here. I understand. I was a troublemaker in school, so I did a lot of things not good. But in this case, I saw this position actively working in a school that has had some issues in the past, and the staff members all seem to be encouraged by it. So don't we want our staff in our schools to feel good? And don't we want the
No.
kids to be, and there was no
No.
arguments from the kids.
No, because it's new. You see, it's a new idea. That's
Right.
It's a new thing in Worcester Public Schools, and anything that didn't start before May of 2022 is bad. If the last superintendent didn't do it, it's wrong. That is what I got from this school committee meeting. The number of times that we heard, this is how it's been for years. This is how we did it for years. The most mundane things. This is how we did it for years. This is how it's been for a long time. And even once she managed to say, I think it was a slip up. She said, "Well, when I was superintendent, we did it. Did it X, Y, Z." You're not superintendent for a reason. You know what those reasons are? Well, I don't know. Actually, I can't ascribe the reasons, but I can tell you what performance was. Right?
I think you're gonna.
I am. Oh, I'm gonna. So let's talk about dropout rates. So in former Superintendent Bernenda's first year, 2017, right, 2016-17 school year, the dropout rate was 2.2%. That was 242nd. I put TH in the piece, and I shouldn't have, because it's 242nd in the state, according to DESI stats. It moved up in former superintendent's last year, 2022, 22 school year, to 2.1%. That did move up a bunch of spots, so it moved up to 220th in the state. Okay,
a little
so
game.
If you use the high school population at the time, in 22, it was like 72 change students. It was about 7 more students she kept in school. Congratulations.
Okay.
We could also, and now look, I'm not a fan of MCAS. Don't get me wrong, but it is an empirical measurement that we can use, right? So what I did was in 2022, her last year, there were 17 different measurements that DESI provides. Different grades, different math tests, science tested a couple grades, etc.
Tell the people watching who DESI is.
DESI is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Here in Massachusetts.
The primary is basically it's complicated because it's not that we do have an education department, but DESI is kind of the governing body of all the schools, of all the school systems. They're the ones that do the oversight on budget and on necessary spending, right? Every city there's a formula that spits out what every city has to spend of their own money on schools to be eligible for the state funding. State funding being the overwhelming majority of what funds education in Worcester and every other municipality. So there was 17 tests or scores that DESI put out for 2022. The average of those, every single one of them, was lower than the statewide average. The percentage of students achieving, exceeding or meeting expectations, right? Everyone was lower. In her final year, it was by an average of 16.8%. So that means 16.8 students for every 100 were less than the state average of achieving or exceeding expectations. In her first year, it was 17.2. like 1,500 kids out of the 24,000 kids in her last year. If we use the numbers from the last year, it's about 1,500 kids got to meeting expectations over 6 years. Why would we continue to do anything the same? Why would we continue to do anything the same?
The other thing, the other big thing is that so to me, again, this it's kind of an open and obvious thing that we have a person who is upset that they lost their job, specifically upset at the group of people in the room that they're now a coworker with. And they're going to do anything they can to derail the process. And to me, that's just ridiculous. And
none of it has anything to do. None of it has anything to do with doing better for the kids to go to Worcester Public Schools. Zero.
True.
It might in their mind.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, and if you read my piece on this, I have a healthy dose of former Mayor Ray Mariano's appears many times in the piece as well, because he started in on this superintendent months after she started.
And of course, Ray has had for a long time a really long working relationship with the former superintendent, and they've known each other quite well for many years. Yeah.
Oh, and they've joined. They are both universally in support of John Manfredo. Let's not forget that. But we won't go there
firebombs today, Tom. What's going on, dude? We need to get to the point where we talk about dessert.
I called this piece the Keep Failing caucus within the Worcester School Committee, because we shouldn't change anything. Schools are horribly underperforming. God bless the teachers that stay here and have worked here for a long time, the young teachers that plan to stay here for a long time. It's not their fault. As all members at the time of the school committee, but John Manfredo, decided it was time for leadership change because nothing was working.
Right. And also there had to be a change, because remember, we all went through a collective worldwide trauma that has changed the paradigm for learning for students. And we have to take time to have an invested, dedicated leadership structure that's trying to figure out this new group of students that just had this really radical shift. And it's not just the fact that we had COVID and they got shift to online learning, which was universally a failure, Zoom-based classes. But we also have to look at the fact that these kids are different than the kids right before them because of device culture, right? Everybody has tablets and phones, and so learning has changed. And so we can't have someone that was leading in a different paradigm lead now. We had to have a change. There's that. But on top of that, we also have a school system that has had a huge change in the ethnic population over the past 15 years. We're now heading towards a school district that is a majority minority school district. So we needed to bring in someone with experience within that structure as well. And frankly, the former superintendent just didn't have that experience. And so that cultural experience and the language barriers that exist for a lot of these kids, we need to be able to engage them. And so having a new person in charge of that is a good deal. By the way, the other thing is, you don't want to have someone in charge of these positions for that long. We're doing the same thing in the city manager position. We're doing the same thing in the police chief position. By the way, I don't know if you heard on Mandy's interview, the police chief said that he does not want to stay around for a long period of time. Paul Saucier. He believes that it should be a constantly changing position. So that was a big breaking news here, new to the city of Worcester. But those positions should have turnover, right? Especially when they're not elected, they're appointed. You need to have people changing in and out and bringing in new ideas, because sometimes it gets stagnant. So this just bitterness is really dragging down the school committee meetings. But let me give credit to some of the members who are staying on point and focused on, delivering the votes, because it would be really easy to get bogged down into battling and talking back and arguing back and forth. And so I give credit to the members who are not doing that, because they're just not getting involved in some of the back and forth that is really happening. There's lots of personal attacks. There's a tone sometimes in the room that are just it's actually worse than the city council in some respects.
is.
How
It is.
bad it is.
And you know, my favorite part of that clip was actually school committee member Biancaria lamenting that there won't be more long-term suspensions, because that's what's good for kids, is not being in school at all. You know, and this is actually what started that was the issue really that started the trend toward as superintendent, Ms. Benenda moving out the door. It was the year before that, I believe. The year before they decided not to leave to renew her contract, if I remember correctly, maybe it was 2 years. There was a whole scandal about how many kids they were throwing out of school.
Right.
And
Expulsion
as soon as
goes way up.
Yeah, because you know that's what's best for kids is to throw them out of school because they misbehave, not try and work with them, not try and do some corrective. I mean, people need to understand that although you personally might be, we live in a very poor city.
We do.
And
we do live that's a really big issue that people don't realize. These kids
Right.
mostly economically are coming from tough economic situations, and we really have to invest in them in a different way. And so of course they're going to be upset. Maybe they didn't eat that morning, right? So it's like it's not the easiest situation to be in. I know this because I was a poor kid growing up, and so sometimes I would go to school pissed off. And then I would get to school, have to do school stuff. And then there's other kids who were very similar to me who were also pissed off. And then guess what happened? We got pissed off at each other. It's not really that difficult.
It's not that complex. Yeah.
It's not that complex. And so we need to create situations where these kids can thrive. That's the whole point of school, and is allowing a kid to thrive and to become the best version of themselves educationally, to become a good student, to be prepared for college if they're going to go to college, or be prepared for work life if they're going to be prepared for work life. When I was at Clark University, I just graduated last year. One of the things I did is I tutored students as part of my financial aid package, right? So I got grants if I tutored certain students. So I tutored students, and almost all the students that I tutored were either international students or local kids from Worcester who just had come out of the high school system. And I saw how unprepared they often were compared to the international students who knew how to, for example, write a 5-page essay or be able to, make argumentation, because the graduation from high school to college is a very radical graduation. That's why usually the first semester of college is usually considered that easy thing, but it's a very difficult transition, particularly in your ability to say your thoughts and write your thoughts.
Yep.
And those kids struggled with it, and so I was able to kind of help them with that because I have experience writing. But that's something that's an issue, and we see now. Now that's 5 years ago. We see now a superintendent who talks about that. Dr. Monterez regularly talks about preparing students for secondary, for secondary education, for post high school, for work. That she's preparing them maybe to own their own businesses. I've never heard a superintendent of Worcester talk about entrepreneurial classes for kids. This is what this superintendent is talking about, preparing these kids to become business owners or go become doctors, lawyers, whatever they're going to be. That's the kind of thing I think is amazing. We're not just making them workers at Macy's or CVS. She's trying to prepare them for an opportunity to have economic jump, to go to the next level for them and their families. And to me, I think that's the kind of leadership that we really need. So in the end, all this is doing is making me support Dr. Monterez more.
Yep. God forbid that our school system produced workers that businesses wanted. Maybe some of them would move here.
Yeah, maybe kids would stay here too. That would be great. Because that's what we do. We have a huge exodus of young people in the city. Our city, some of the things that have been happening lately, people didn't notice in those census numbers, despite the fact that we have an influx maybe of people from other places. We also have an aging population, and that is a more dramatic curve. We got to pay attention to that. And part of the reason is because young people are leaving. It's not that they're not here. It's just that they're not staying in Worcester. And why? Why aren't they staying in Worcester? There's many, many, many reasons why. We have to make the city, including the school system, be a reason why people would stay. You want young families to move here and bring their kids up in our school systems. That's what you want. And we're just not, we need leadership that is focused on that and not focused on the past.
And there's also been and this will be this next piece, and what has become a series on the Worcester School Committee. The next piece will address administrative costs. This has been a narrative, again, started by Ray Mariano, who, it's interesting. We have a 6th term. This is now, there was a term off for a member, Biancaria, of the school committee. She lost, had a term off, and then won again for this current term. But this is now in her 6th term. We had a 6-year superintendent, was in the school for 40 years, and thank you for your public service. And a former mayor who hasn't been in city politics in 20 years, who was the mayor for 5 terms, which made him chairperson of the school committee, and was 17 points off of the state average for the number of students meeting or exceeding expectations on MCAS. Maybe we shouldn't listen to anything these people say. Maybe the new superintendent is here to fix the mess that they created.
And another thing is that clearly the former superintendent and the former mayor don't have a good relationship with the school committee, who were elected by the people of Worcester. So there's a real personal, gut check to say, why don't I have a good relationship with this group of 6 people? Obviously there was a couple of changeovers in the last election. There was an even bigger group, but there was a negative relationship there between these two individuals and this group. And that relationship building is another thing that is really, really necessary for these city leading positions. You need to have a good relationship with the legislature of the city. And if you don't, then you won't have a result like you ended up having here, where the superintendent got the votes and there was no changes made to the budget that she submitted. So that gives you an idea that those 6 people, and I thought that, I watched all the meetings. I know you watched all the meetings. When you see the meetings and you watch the actual budget hearings, what I saw a really robust at paying attention to details by this group of people. So including the 3 that are arguing about it. So there's a lot of details brought up here, but it wasn't like you had one group that's just going to blanket vote for this thing. No, they really questioned. I thought Member Mailman was questioning the superintendent pretty regularly, and Mayor Petty, I thought, brought up a bunch of significant points. So it wasn't like it was unchallenged by the group of 6 that voted for the budget. They were challenging the superintendent, and I thought that there was some really good conversations there that didn't have the same tone as some of the other conversations. So there is some value to having a good relationship where you can then challenge somebody, right? Like our relationship, Tom, where we disagree, but we still like each other.
We pretend, at least. On this note of, and I'll have a full breakdown of this, don't you worry, in my next piece of the subject. But this is the reality of administrative costs, according to DESE, who looks at school budgets and audits them, right? So keep in mind the numbers for 2024 are still projected according to DESE. They're based on the budget that the school committee passed a year ago for the school year that just finished. So that that hasn't all been wrapped up by DESE yet, but this is the data we have right now. Is that the total administrative cost, as classified by DESE, it moved from 17th of the top 20 cities by population in the state. I took the top 20 cities and compared administrative costs. Guess where Worcester ranked? You'd think if you read Mariano or you listen to these school committee members, and that the out of control administrative costs. What do you think? What do you think out of control means? What do you think they rank in the top 20 cities by population in administrative costs?
Well, I mean, I happen to know the numbers, so I'm assuming that they're actually pretty low because the numbers are really not that high, the percentage of the overall budget.
The administrative costs changed from 23, which, remember, Superintendent Monterez started July 1, 2022. That's the first day of the fiscal year. She had nothing to do with that budget, right? This budget that we're talking about now, last year, she submitted a budget proposal, which was, the school committee went through. Same thing happened this year, right? So this is her second budget. Even though she's going into her third year, this will only be going into the second year of her budget proposal. So in the last year, administrative costs went from 17th of those 20 cities to 12th.
Okay.
So there are 11 cities. We went from the last quarter to the third quarter. That's out of control. That's a spending spree, according to Mariano.
That's a reduction.
No.
So,
As in the highest would be 1. So we went from 17th, understaffed administration, to 12th.
Okay. So we went up a little bit.
Yep. There's no doubt she put more administrators in place. Maybe because she knows how to run a school system. Just a thought. And the increase of the percentage of total budget. Those are, by the way, not total cost. That's a percentage of the total budget, right? Because of course, Boston's total budget is 3 times the size of Worcester's. Other cities have much smaller budgets, so I did that by percentage of total budget. By the way, Boston is it's 1 spot ahead of Worcester still, with its 3 times the size of a budget. The numbers went from they changed 0.61%, changed a little over half a percentage point as a percentage of the total budget. Now the budget went up last year, right?
It went up or down?
It went up. It went up 0.61%. That's a spending spree, according to Ray Mariano, our education expert who hasn't been in government in 20 years.
That's a big jump, Tom. 0.61%, 0.061%. So, So my question is that I like to look at things in the bigger context. So the overall spend on administration versus teaching, right, is it's only about 3%, right?
Yes. In the 24 projected DESI numbers, administration was 15.4 million. Instruction was 275 million, and the total budget was 487 million.
So about 3%, right, of the total budget is spent on administration costs.
It went from 2.56 to 3.17%.
All right. So I mean, to me, that's a reasonable number of administration, and it's not going to affect the $22 million deficit that was related to inflation that has led to some of these cuts. By the way, based on the information presented by member Bienda and Bianchera, it's not all teachers' jobs that are getting cut, because we were losing a janitor, at least one janitor from
the total number of custodians went up 2, but they had to reallocate because they have a new building that needs more than 2, right?
So we're moving stuff around. What I'm saying is that not every position or person, let me say it this way, not every person who may or may not have lost their job was a teacher, right? There were some positions that were lost. Like, for example, this is the other thing too. You got to listen to some of these. They don't listen to Mayor Petty. There was a bunch of some of these positions. I think it was 16 of the positions weren't someone getting fired. They were retirements. So, and now in the first year of the retirement, this is something people don't realize. If you look at that, that's part of the actual budget thing. They have to plan for the initial costs to move a teacher that's been around for a long time into the retirement plan, which is then moved into the general fund. But the school budget is part of that at the beginning, right? So then there's things that are related there that people don't realize. I mean, we're talking about people who have maybe been in the school system, like you said, for 25, 30 years, and they're retiring and moving on. And so their salaries are going to probably be actually lower than new teachers, because they started 20 years ago when teacher salaries were still ridiculously low, and they haven't made these huge jumps over the past 25 years. So the initial cost of hiring a teacher now is actually higher, right? So it's going to naturally create a budget, that's more restricted, because to hire a new teacher, to retain a talented local teacher costs more now than it did, 25 years ago. So you got to pay it. Some of the arguments are just not based in reality, and so we need to like look at these
Yeah.
numbers and the pushback. I really have to say, I thought Mayor Petty made a bunch of good points when he was talking about that. When he said, "Hey, although these people are retiring, they're not retiring with massive salaries. They're retiring with salaries that are related to these older increases from years and years ago."
Since you mentioned Petty, let's go to another video, because here's a rare case of this is as mad as I've ever. He's usually very calm. He gets irritated, but he isn't. This is as angry as I've seen him in a meeting.
Am I missing something here? This is an existing position in the Worcester Public Schools. And we said,
position-
we're going to save the job.
No.
Now we want to cut the job.
No,
So that we take the motion to cut it,
You're understanding that they're gonna take 50% of the profit from that high school.
to pay for the position.
Pay
So
for
they
the
want
position.
so they don't want to cut it. Correct,
So,
to save the
Well,
position.
how else can we get it so that?
Make a
high
cut somewhere
schools
else in the
aren't-
budget and ask to apply for it.
The high schools are not losing their money. They need that money to fund.
Everybody needs the money. We're trying to cut $22 million out of this
I
budget.
realize-
We got 400,000 in reserves, and they're going to have more money come into those reserves. Yes, okay. So we're going to cut, the motion is to cut this position at, how much was that, 50 what? 52. So the motion is to cut $52,000. Roll call.
Member Alvarez?
No.
Member Biancaria?
Mayor, I ask you that you please read that motion.
The motion is, Ms. Fernandez's motion is to cut this position out of the budget. So $52,000 is money associated with that.
Well, hold on, can I?
Now she's
change the motion
filibustering
to
in a roll call.
Cut this position and transfer the duties to a current position?
It's,
We'll just make somebody else do twice as much. What are we talking about? So let me give you a little context on this. What they did, right? This is related to rentals of school facilities, okay?
Right.
So most of the rentals come from, as Mr. Brian Allen said, who's been with the Worcester School Department, the school system since the Volk merger. He's been with schools since 1999. He said, what we're going to do here, rather than cut this position that is focused on coordinating rentals, right? Rather than cut this position, what we're going to do is we're going to basically put a tax on the revenue generated by rentals to pay for this position who's going to help coordinate this stuff, right? He made some other interesting points, however, about this. He said that one, our facilities, meaning the schools department's facilities, are horribly underutilized. We're using very little capacity. We want to see that improve, which would make sense to kind of bring that in-house, coordinate it with one person, have a kind of a unified effort, right? And the kicker about this is, and see, this is what happens when you want to play obstructionist, is things get said that show you for what you are. Mr. Allen also said that the department recently conducted a study of surrounding communities, and it found that the rental rates for Worcester's public schools are horrifically overpriced and is directly affecting why our facilities are so underutilized. Where did those pricing policies come from? How much? Maybe if the former superintendent had been competent with the pricing policies of those facilities, she could have paid for more another administrator who might have helped her not screw everything up.
And this is something that is interesting. So South High, you went you were at the inauguration ceremonies in January. South High is brand new, right? And it's got this wonderful auditorium space, fully functional sound, audio, video. And so there's a bunch of groups that want to rent that. Local community theater groups, people who want to do events there, because it's literally as nice as an event space, and it really should be rented. So I actually asked about the pricing. What does it cost? And the number was unbelievably high. And I know this because I price venues all the time. And so, it was comparative with Mechanics Hall, and if you know Mechanics Hall, Mechanics Hall is this world class facility that is known around the world for being opulent and beautiful, and this is a high school, and so it really shouldn't be comparative. It shouldn't be even in the ballpark. And so what
Not
it
even
does
in
is
the ballpark.
it means that people won't rent the space. And so that's a way that modern high schools for decades now, this is not like something that started the other day. They will rent that space out at night, because remember, the kids are not there at night, and the space can be utilized to generate income that could then offset the school budget. So saying that they want to, and then but you need somebody who's in like you said, someone from the internal staff, because there are rules and regulations related to buildings that house children. So we have to have, you can't just have anybody coming into the school, and you have to coordinate security, you have to coordinate all these things that and those have to be paid for. And then guess what happens? The staff that works at the school, they get income offset because they're getting paid for staying later or different things like that. The school creates income not only for the building and for the overall budget, but for their employees that are in-house. And that should be the way. And you don't want to be bringing in outside companies, because you have a bunch of other schools where you could bring people from and give them an opportunity to make in a little bit of extra cash. It's literally genius, but this this proposal was to eliminate that position.
Yes.
So they figured out a way.
And yeah, right. So it's not, taxpayers aren't paying for it. It's coming from revenue from the rentals, of which the school system has a $400,000 reserve from rentals of the past, right? So they've built up a reserve. Those funds are, I didn't quite get all the details. They didn't really talk through all the details of what that fund's dedicated to, but I get the impression that from some of the stuff that was said, that it's really dedicated to rental operations, right? So it's not like they can dip into it. They dip into it for stuff, which was what part of this discussion was about. So in the past, apparently, here we go, in the past, the schools where these rentals took place, which only happens in, now it's probably 5. Mr. Allen said 3 or 4, right, currently. And then, they expect Doherty to now be another possible place that people would be interested in renting, right? And this whole 18 minutes this went on, by the way, to try to cut one $52,000 position so this, quote, high schools could, quote, keep their money because they happen to be the place. So let's get this straight. The school manages school facilities the taxpayers pay for. And if somebody rents a facility inside a school, and that only happens in 3 or 4 places, now going to be 4 or 5, that school should retain all of those resources. So if your kid doesn't go to one of the 5 newly built schools, your kid can go to hell. You're not important.
Right.
But the kids that go
to
the new schools, they deserve more. They go to a new school through no fault of their own, or no, it's, the woman's insane. I can't. It was the most irritating. I mean, I have sat through a lot of government meetings in my day. I watch city council front to back every week that it's on. Okay.
Yeah.
This was the most irritating meeting I've ever seen in my life.
It was pretty rough, and like you said, I know Mayor Petty pretty well. I have a good relationship with him,
he does not get that mad. He does not.
Never gets that mad, and not like that. That was openly frustrated Mayor Petty, and because the whole point is this: the money generated is paying for this position. It's a position that we want to retain because it doesn't actually cost the taxpayers anything, and it generates income that could maybe, if it's managed well, lead to more income for all the schools. And that just is apparently not a good idea in this particular group. It was a silly decision, and then the vote reflected it pretty well. That motion was denied, which it should have been. Yeah,
they all were denied. These two went on, and I mean, from we want to throw more kids out of school, to we want to let the high schools keep this money. Like, what are we talking about? So screw the kids at the school that don't. I don't know what would I don't even think I don't know. I don't know. Like again, this is Hillary Clinton in 2017 on her book tour, telling everybody it was because somebody ran against me in the primary that I lost. It wasn't calling at the opposition supporters deplorables or the 417 stupid things that she did in that campaign, or the fact that 65% of Americans just don't like her. It had nothing to do with that. It was all because somebody ran. It's all somebody else's fault I lost.
Yeah, personal reflection is a difficult thing for a lot of people to do.
And that's fine. And I get no people have, you know what? People have flaws. But, you know, if people think I'm being too tough, she decided to run for school committee. And she decided to say, she want to say no to absolutely everything the person that was hired to clean up the mess that she left behind wants to do. Sorry.
It just doesn't reflect. It doesn't reflect well. And by the way, again, other. So part of my part of my role when I was on the cable commission was to talk to other towns and cities, and we're kind of made fun of by local towns nearby. We're not respected at all in our government functions, and so this is just another example of we want to be a world-class city. Remember, that's what the city manager says. We want to be a world-class city, and but we can't get on the same page about the school budget.
Well, I mean, I don't, you know what? And I don't mind opposition, and I don't mind opposition for opposition's sake, even.
Yeah,
there always should be opposition, but when it's opposition that's so blatantly, deeply personal.
Because
like
I actually think
did you wrong. You worked in the schools for 43 years, and somehow you were wrong because they didn't want to extend your contract. And now, now I'm digging in. Now I'm going to find everything that you did wrong because you're a horrible person.
You're making Tom mad, and so now Tom's gonna run you down.
I mean, let's talk about, I mean, that's just the two obvious things: scores, MCAS scores, and dropouts. You did nothing. You accomplished nothing.
And we talked about it before. So and then it cuts into my really fun podcast time because we have to spend 45 minutes on it. Thanks a lot, member Bienda. Because I want to talk about other stuff.
All right. So I'm gonna have there's another piece ready to go that's gonna come out tomorrow, and we're gonna talk about how your kids, if you don't happen to go to one of the 5 schools that were built in the last decade or so, screw your kid. We're gonna talk about that every day.
By the way,
every 3 days.
I know some of the members do watch the show. I hope that they do push for the superintendent, and I hope Superintendent Monterez does lower the prices of the rentals. Make them reasonable, and even consider beating the market, right? Because it will draw people, long-term people. I know several theater groups that are interested in renting out the schools, and the way that you draw those things is you have to create sustainability because these prices are not. You can't try to make a killing on these things. You need to just. And by the way, the schools otherwise are just sitting empty. They're sitting empty, not being used, or they could be used by groups that, and you can make it for nonprofits. There's so many organizations that could benefit from use of those facilities because we do have really expensive facilities here in Worcester. JMAC, like I said, Mechanics Hall, Tuckerman Hall, the DCU Center. They're all really, really expensive and more expensive than facilities in surrounding towns. And so we need to be competitive. All those theater groups, by the way, they're going to towns around and they're renting out their things. So we're again losing money. Worcester money is going to Auburn and Holden and all these other places. We need to change that.
Yeah. So we can move on from that. That's my rant for the day. It's just the whole thing is kind of pathetic and really disgusting.
Stuff. You want to talk about the Supreme Court now?
That there's no deference to this, to this superintendent, and you brought this woman in from California to run the schools for a reason because the school committee thought that she was exceptionally qualified. I happen to agree. It's been 2 years. That's not a fair time to judge. I mean.
Normally, you want a lot of like a 5-year window to judge. Generally, it's a high school session and a year, right? So because you kind of want to get a grip on an 8th grader and what is to really determine how she's doing is the 8th graders when she first started graduating from high school. That's kind of giving you an idea because they have to transition from 8th grade to high school. Then they have to go through the hardest years of their lives for most people and then become, college students or move into the workforce. That period of time takes 5 years to judge. And so you need to get a person that has 5 years under their belt to really get a grip on whether or not they're succeeding. And so then that's really the time period that you're kind of looking at. So give her a chance. She still hasn't been given a full chance, by
Right.
by this particularly small group of people that are against her.
And last little anecdote. Brian Allen, again, been with the school system since 1999. He's basically the CFO of the schools, and he's a deputy superintendent. When he said that there was $400,000 in this reserve fund. Remember, Benenda said, I couldn't say the name right then, said, well, they actually don't have that much, and then went on a whole rant about what happens at South High School. The new South High School opened in April 22. Her position finished May 31st, 22. She doesn't know what happens there. It's a different school, for God's sake.
Yeah, a much better school, a safe school, a school that is built for kids.
But she knows, what, two years removed from being superintendent, she knows what's in the facilities reserve fund. And Brian Allen
there that feed her information, and there's parents that, again, there's a group of people that are just against things, and that's just the way it is. It's just opposition for the sake of opposition.
Yeah, and again, no, it's not. But it's so blatantly and obviously deeply personal. It's really reprehensible. Like, again, there should be opposition. No, there shouldn't be 1,009 no votes. There shouldn't, right? Even opposition just to be the opposition. So there's opposition. Opposition for opposition's sake is fine, but it's so deeply personal and not about, it's not being done in good faith. And Biancaria just repeats what Benenda says. Roy doesn't say anything. It's gross. The whole thing's disgusting. Moving on.
Tell us how you really feel, Tom. Supreme Court decisions. Dun, dun,
All
dun,
right,
dun, dun.
let's find out all the reasons why you're wrong on Chevron. Go.
All right. Well, Chevron, let's hold Chevron for the end. Let's first start with Grants Pass. So for those of you who are watching or looking at this later, Grants Pass is the decision where is a town in California that decided to fine and arrest people who were experiencing homelessness, the unhoused. And that decision to support this by the Supreme Court is unbelievably ridiculous. And it actually contradicts the decision that they made in the Chevron case. But so what this does is it actually criminalizes sleeping in the outdoors. And for me, like this is an example of people who have not experienced things. Justice Gorsuch, wrote this opinion, and he determined that the reason we can find people who are unhoused is because that's how we punish people. We find people, so therefore that's okay to do it to them, which is saying that what they're doing is a crime, even though they don't have any money because they're homeless and out of work. Okay, now let's not get into the other things that are factors of homelessness, but let's say this. Last year was the biggest single year increase in homelessness in the history of the United States. We had 12% increase, a 12% jump in a single year. And it's not all people from other countries. The vast majority and is locals, people from here, people that have already been living here that either lost their jobs, lost their house, full families, man. And in Grants Pass in particular, you can go and watch the videos for yourself. They're really difficult to see. You see entire families, mom, dad, kids, living on the streets because the economy has affected the folks at the bottom really, really badly over the past decade. And so, and it's not just, and I don't want to say it's just Biden or just Trump. This is something that has been going on since the first term of the Obama administration. We're still dealing with the fallout from the housing bubble, there's still things that are happening that people don't think. They look at economics only in these small gaps, 2 years, 4 years, but we're talking about decades long trends that we have to pay attention to or our country is in a lot of trouble, which it is. And this is one of the issues. We're not taking care of the most vulnerable, and this decision is just radical. It's unbelievable that this was the decision that was made, and so I repudiate this decision. It's the wrong decision. It just doesn't reflect reality. And again, how are they going to collect the fines? How are they going to collect the fines? There's no way for
Run
the
those
people.
they'll run those people into debt for the rest of their life. That's what they'll do.
So, and then we have municipal debt. And then the only way in certain states. Now, by the way, California is one of the states where you can pay off your debt by going to jail. So what you're saying to these folks is, and I believe I looked it up, but the I can't. It's hard to see in the California Department of Corrections like how it works exactly, because there's all these there's so many sheriff's departments and local jail. It's just crazy how many jails there are in California. But basically what I've able to identify is about $50 a day for going to jail. You can get off your debt. So if you now the grants pass fine in particular is $295, right? So that means it would take a week in jail to pay off that fine. And then when you get out, you're still homeless. And so then you're gonna go back to sleeping on the street, and then you can get a fine again, $295. So if you think about that, every day on sleeping on the street is worth 6 days in jail. Think about what that means for people, folks. Of course it's cruel and unusual. That's ridiculous. You're saying that for one night of sleeping is worth 6 days in jail. That makes no sense. It's just so completely detached from reality that these justices have lost their way in this particular area. It just shows that what people that are, and I don't want to say that they're low class because they're not, but the people at the bottom part of the economic structure of our country are being more and more and more left behind by the elites. All these judges, they've been through the best law schools and the best colleges and were invested in, and none of them have had. No, and this includes, and even the liberal justices. None of them had to struggle in their lives in the way that the people that they just made a judgment for did, and just a terrible decision. I don't even know how. I can't even. I want to get mad about that. But then the other decision is the Chevron case. So Chevron is actually a decision from 1984. A lot of people don't follow this kind of stuff. But what Chevron was a case where the judges at the time determined that it was better for administrators of agencies to have say on regulations that they themselves wrote and put into place. Okay, and that the court systems should give deference to those agencies. And in this particular case, it was over fishing boats. This is a very specific regulation, but it's actually New England based. These fishing boats had to have regulators in the boats, and then the fishing captains were forced to pay for the salary of those regulators who were checking the boats to make sure that they were doing the right thing. Okay, so that particular individual thing, I think that the Supreme Court did make a really broad decision in gutting Chevron and completely eliminating it, and then creating space where none of those agencies can make these decisions. And it's going to have broad implications that are going to take decades to work out, for sure. I agree with the Chevron decision, but I don't agree with their reasoning behind it. So their reasoning is because they want to gut the administrative state. This group of 6 justices believes that they have to get power back to the judges, get power back to the judicial system. That's not why I think Chevron should have been taken down. I think Chevron was wrong from the get-go because our legislatures for decades now have not done their job right, which is they don't write law, they write broad legislation, and then they let agencies fill in the law, which has created a power vacuum in Congress that has been fed by the executive. Now, when you have a president you like, right, doing that, you like their executive decisions, you like the agency members that they put into place, you feel good about it. And those experts might be doing the right thing. But when you have a president you don't like, you get these constant regulation reversals, which we've seen now, particularly since George Bush the first, as I like to call him. When President Clinton was elected president, he began the kind of tradition of just completely eliminating all the executive decisions of the prior person. That really wasn't a common thing, but it's become a common thing. And then George W. Bush did it to President Clinton. President Obama did it to George W. Bush, and then President Trump took it to another level of just changing what the presidents before. And why does this happen? Because we have regulatory agencies kind of making these laws into place. But that's not why they should be doing it. They should be involved with these agencies altogether. There should be oversight. And so we lack oversight. And then you have the Supreme Court come in and make this broad, sweep. Here's why it contradicts the Grants Pass. Grants Pass is about allowing these municipalities to be, to have oversight in relation to the homelessness thing. So it's giving government power more authority for oversight. But then Chevron eliminates oversight. So the logic train that they followed in both of these cases is crazy, even though I agree with the decision to get rid of Chevron. Because I think there's a better way to do it. I'm not saying that agencies shouldn't have authority. I'm just saying Chevron was a poor case, and it's been gutted. It's been slowly chipped away at for 20 years. And so, it was only a matter of time, but the way that they did it is going to cause huge, huge, huge problems.
Yep. So this was a massive power grab by the judiciary, by the most activist Supreme Court that we've ever had in this country. What it does is, what you're going to have now is people in Congress, mostly lawyers, who are going to be forced into decisions about, for example, how much fecal matter can be in the feed that is fed to chickens that you then eat. Right. And I don't want Jim McGovern or pick a congressman I can't stand, somebody I like or somebody I don't, deciding that. I want somebody who knows what they're talking about. And so what you're going to have is, I don't even understand how this is even practical. So what are we going to have? All these regulations, billions of regulations. Some of them are bad, and I'm against bad regulation. I'm with people that want to cut bad regulations. Cutting regulations for the sake of cutting regulations is, a good way to
sweeping them away is going to have implications.
So the safety of our food will suffer. The safety of our drugs will suffer. The safety of our motor vehicles will suffer. Pretty much everything is going to suffer, because now what is Congress supposed to do? Are they supposed to regulate the pressure per square inch on this and that inside of whatever of a car? They don't know how to do that. That's why we have regulatory agencies, and that's why it was managed by the elected president of the United States, who has oversight over, or has, who leads the executive branch, and then Congress can have hearings and look at these regulations or what the executive branch is doing. Instead, the judiciary decided we're going to now, we've already completely forgotten that precedent existed after we all perjured ourselves when confirmed. And two of us take money from some of the richest people in the country. And they also ruled, by the way, this is the best one of the three, actually. They also ruled that if you're a politician, you can't take money in exchange for doing something, but you can accept patronage after the fact. So if I pass a law you want after the fact, you can give me all the money you want.
Yeah, I just got to wait for you to be out of Congress, right? And then I can just hand you as much.
Oh, no.
Oh, just not during the process. Right.
Not if you can't pay me to get the law passed, but you can pay me after the law is passed.
I can give you a boat or something, right? Give you that nice boat that you wanted, Tommy. Send you out there.
And this really ties into, in a way, this ties into the debates. But go ahead.
So the thing about the regulatory agencies. So how does Congress do its job? Well, so now this is like a bigger argument about the kind of what's happened in American history over the past 60 years, since really President Nixon. There's a bunch of problems that happened in his administration that we are still paying for today, and Lyndon Johnson too. I don't want to get him off the hook, but the Vietnam War led to a bunch of structures that we're still dealing with. But anyways, the problem is that in some of the agencies, what you have somebody who's lobbying Congress to write a law in a certain way. I don't know, Facebook. And then they pass the law, and then on the agency itself, on the FCC, you have a former executive at Facebook who is now voting on the regulations. And so there's where the argument comes. And that argument is a compelling argument because Facebook shouldn't be able to put executives on the FCC commission or the and neither should whatever Bank of America putting their executives literally on the SEC and then getting away with murder. That's not what the point of it is. Congress should be engaging with those experts. Part of the reason why this happened was the speed with which Congress moved has slowed tremendously. So if there's a new thing that develops, like, I don't know, wind power or solar power, you need regulations from the industry that's developing these things at a rapid pace, AI. And now you're not going to get that because Congress is not smart enough to be able to understand that information. And so the only way for that to work is you'd have to get someone who knows AI to run for Congress and then want to be involved with the legislative process. And that's just not what happens, right? Because how much money do you make in Congress? And you just brought it up. You don't make any money in Congress. You make money in kickbacks and all this other stuff. And that's really the problem. Our government has been almost openly corrupt for many, many, many decades. It's really, really bad. And now the judges are just doing it blatantly. And so we have a broken system. And so this goes to the argument of many of my conservative friends and people who believe in this idea of the right versus the left and all this other stuff. You can't look at it anymore and say someone's doing it right, because none of them are doing it right. Not the executive, not the judicial, not the legislative branch. We're just dealing with a total failure of American government, which of course was really reflected in the topic we're going to hit last, which is the debate between our two presidential candidates on Thursday.
Yeah, just one last thing on this. It was many years ago now, maybe a decade ago. I was involved in a different business, and I went with a professional group to Washington, D.C. to lobby, basically, right? It was that professional group's day on the Hill, right? And I sat in the conference room of Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin and his legislative director, and I quote, "Good, that's what we want to see, the industry writing its own legislation."
And that is why we're where we're at. And then we get activist judges who then make this decision in the way that they did it. And by the way, like I said, I agreed with the core part of the decision, but they didn't do that, which I thought Judge Jackson, not Judge, Judge Sotomayor made a great point in her dissent about the idea that this could have been a much narrower pencil that they could have used to work through regulations over a period of time. But because of this so broad, they just swept away 40 plus years of precedent. And the language is very clear that it is saying Chevron is dead. So every case based on it, so much so that then they had to edit the decision. If you saw that on Friday, they came up with a second edited decision where Judge Gorsuch wrote a signing note, which said, and you can see this on SCOTUS blog if you want to check it out. It's a great website that covers the Supreme Court. And he had to write what's called a signing statement, which happens in all three branches of the government. But this is basically the justice saying this doesn't mean that every single case that has Chevron as a component is going to be overturned, because on Friday after the decision came out, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits were filed all over the country by groups who were watching for this decision, waiting to file lawsuits based on this decision. So now he's trying to signal to those groups like, hey, it's not going to be open season, but that's how they're going to view it.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is going to be open season.
And now it's going to jam the courts up, because now the courts are going to have to deal with all of those cases, and they have to take it now because the Supreme Court just said Chevron is dead. So
and then I don't even want to spend much time on this. I didn't even watch the debate because I
watched the whole debate.
That's how interested I am. I saw some of the fallout, the day after. I don't know. I mean, he was terrible from what I understand. And then the next day, he's in front of a crowd and he looks like he's I mean, I'm not going to say he looks young and chipper, but he did a rally the next day and seemed like a different guy. So, I mean, it's well, I have a wrap on this, but go ahead. Give us your thoughts.
So real quick, and again, I'm not telling people who to vote for, who not to vote for. What I will, because I think that's I don't want to influence people, but I will say this: President Biden had a really, really poor performance. But in particular, I want to say that his handlers, the people who support him, the people who feed him information, they had a really, really poor performance because they did not prepare for the things that President Trump said. There was nothing that President Trump said that was unexpected. Every single point that he made is the things that he's been saying on the campaign trail and that he was saying when he was president. So you're not looking at new information. But not only that, in the debate they had in 2020, the same arguments were laid out then, and we had President Biden not prepared for those things, and that really makes it's almost like they tried to anticipate that Trump was going to go in a different direction, and he didn't.
He didn't have a different direction. All he knows how to do is say whatever comes to his head. Doesn't matter if it's true or not.
And so what happened was President Biden was so unprepared and so kind of stumbly that it gave opportunities for Trump to really play towards that middle of the road voter. But in particular, there was several times where he mumbled and he kind of drifted off into his thoughts. And President Trump was able to say, literally, I don't know what he just said. And that it just exacerbated it. And of course, because there's no audience and it's just two people on screen, it was really, really clear. But that doesn't even matter. And then the policy points, they both lied about a bunch of stuff and it was just crazy. So I don't even want to get into that. What I do, because we have two choices of two men who never tell the truth. Great. Awesome. And I don't even know what to say about it. But what I wanted to focus on was the media's response. And CNN in particular, which is not known for conservatism. And the panel that was on there is not known for being pro-Trump, not at all in any way. They had no choice but to say what happened. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing that our media has to be forced to tell the truth, because that's really what it is. But it's a good thing in that they had to tell the truth, because I could see it with my own eyes. You could, if you went back and watched it, you could see it with your own eyes. But I don't know that necessarily changes the candidacy of President Biden. We all knew that he's a man who's over 80 years old. We knew that. And we know that he's had some sicknesses and he struggled with things. So that's not a new piece of information. Again, I feel like it was predicated by maybe the media wants him to drop out. You've seen a lot of articles about, don't let Joe Biden become Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because somehow they're blaming former Justice Ginsburg for passing away and leading to President Trump being able to appoint a justice, which that is just, I don't get that kind of media coverage. It goes to the point of what you and I are trying to do here and what I do with Manny. And then that is you're supposed to let the truth be told. Let the person say what they're going to say. And then let the person make a decision. You talk about it all the time, Tom. Don't tell people who they can't vote for, right? Let them vote for who they want to vote for, even if you don't like the person, right? That's what you got to do. And in this case, I'm at least a little bit hopeful, because CNN told the truth, that maybe there's room for what we're trying to do, our kind of media project of telling the truth about what we see, not adding our opinions, even though we have opinions, to the facts, and letting the facts stand for themselves. Then maybe there's hope for us. I don't know. So that was my one takeaway, was they told the truth, so maybe there's hope, even though the two candidates did not tell the truth. Not at all.
Yeah, my takeaway is a little broader than that. And it's not really a new thought, but it's certainly reinforced my thought here. We have two corporate entities, the Democrats and the Republicans, that wholly monopolize the federal political system.
That's true.
And this is what they gave us. One guy's 78, one guy's 81.
Yep.
Both, neoliberal nightmares. I think one's worse than the other, but whatever. It doesn't matter which one I think it is. Think about that. The next time you're at a sporting event, or you're in a place, or you're at city council, and in our Christian nation, because Christians are really Christian in America, we stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag, just like God tells you not to.
Oh man.
And so when you stand for the magic song, when they wave the magic sky cloth, and you pretend you're free, remember that 2 corporations gave us this nightmare because they can.
And
So
I think that's a great thing.
Let's stop it with all the nationalist symbols, rockets, red glare bombs bursting in air gave us proof through the night that we're controlled by 2 corporations.
I remember, when I really started to get involved with politics, I had a great history teacher. His name was Mr. Kai. He's passed away. I went to high school at North Brookfield High School years and years ago. I was living in a foster home, and Mr. Kai was just this great history teacher, and he was focused on. He loved to study history, and he loved to really get involved with it. And I remember one of the students in the class, and I won't say their name because they're still alive and I know them. But anyways, the student said in the class, Republicans and Democrats are just opposite sides of the same coin. And Mr. Kai said, no, that's not true. They're both on the same side of the same coin. One is just a little bit closer to the nose, and another one's just a little bit closer to the neck.
Facts.
And I remember that.
Facts.
I'll never forget that statement. And he really, their policies are really not at the national level really that different, right? There's really a couple issues that they have opposite approaches, but realistically, like you said, you pointed out this concept of being neoliberal. They're both pro the military, and again, the Defense Authorization Act has never failed since it became a regular year-end thing in 1967. 1967, it has never failed once, despite the fact that we've had Congresses that hate each other, blah, blah, blah. And if you go and look at the vote totals, we're looking at maybe, a handful of congressmen, senators, and representatives who have voted against that act over the past almost 70 years, right? They are both pro-military and the military industrialization. They're both pro-corporation. There's just now corporations on either side. Like you said, there's 2 big corporations, but they have companies that support either one. They don't really care about us. They don't. And that's really what it comes down to, because if they cared about us, we wouldn't have these as our candidates. We would have somebody hopeful, at least, someone who looks forward to the future, we can be better, but we don't. We have just he said, she said, and actually he said, wham, back and forth, and there was nothing of substance.
It was a different court that did this, but I mean, it's the same continuum, right? This is Supreme Court not that long ago said that spending money in elections is speech. Yep. And now the people that have all the money and are gaining more of it while the rest of us don't, they can not only spend money in elections, they can then outright political patronage, otherwise called as bribery, after the fact. You can pay somebody for achieving a policy result that you wanted. Again, I don't want the drama of if I'm at a thing and they play the magic song and they wave the magic sky cloth. That I don't want the drama of not standing, right? So I just do it because I don't want to have to fight some nut. But this is freedom. You're kidding yourself. You're lying to yourself.
Hey, to give Mr. Kai one more piece of credit, because I know we're getting close. We got to wrap up, right? We're a little over, but I used not to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in that history class. And he was in the Air Force, and he let me sit there, and then he told me about it afterwards. He says, you're making a decision, for your future life, and generally speaking, I stand for it now, and I guess more out of habit really than I don't look at the flag in the way that these people profess to look at the flag, and I don't believe them when they say that they have this feeling for our nation, because if they did, they would work together and they would try to actually come to compromises. And that's the thing about national elections. None of these issues have changed, right? We've been arguing about abortion for 60 years, right? We've been arguing about immigration for 60 years. We've been arguing about military spending for 60 years. We've been arguing about corporations' influence in politics for 60 years. You know what doesn't happen? They don't ever solve it. It's just a different version of the same problem, same continuum, because they want to stay in power. And if you want to talk about nepotism, I know that this week people were complaining that LeBron got his son drafted to the Lakers. By the way, I think it's pretty cool, and I'm not a Lakers fan; I'm a Celtics fan. But it's pretty cool that a dad and a son get to play on an NBA team together. That's awesome, especially if he passes him, gets the dunk. That's dope. But nepotism in Congress is unbelievable. We have families and legacies and just crazy nonsense all over our country. They've lost their way. They've lost their way. Hey, so we got to end, right? But bro,
I just want to acknowledge Shawnee's comment,
Sean.
and that's a really deep topic that would probably go another half an hour. And,
the Bernie
I yelled
topic,
too much today. Yeah, I yelled too much today.
I tell you what, though, man, Bernie,
it.
there was a point when if Bernie had run, I think he would have.
Oh, listen. Oh, here we go. Listen. But this is what people don't seem to get is I don't get how people don't think that guy in the Midwest would mop the floor with anybody. You get him out there talking working class politics, the working class people who are starving to death.
Oh,
he would have
mop
mopped the floor with anybody.
He would, just like, by the way,
he knows how to talk to those people.
To the Ross Perot thing, which I think Ross Perot was paid off. I'm still convinced of that to this day. Ross Perot would have won by far with his little PowerPoint cardboard cutout slides that he used to do. He would have annihilated if he had stayed in that race. And people forget he was winning so much that he was on stage. Oh, Sean wants to come on the Woot Nanny and just hammer the council theater. Oh man, me and Tom on there, we might run roughshod over some of the stuff.
Yeah, we better do it remote because there could be a fist fight in that room.
Yeah, we might. So hey, last thing, right? We've been doing so far. We've done pie and ice cream, right? We have to continue the tradition of a dessert, and we're not gonna run out of desserts because there's so many desserts. But what's your favorite flavor of cake?
It's gonna be nuanced like the Ben and Jerry's thing. My mom's makes this chocolate cake with this cream cheese type frosting. It's not all cream cheese, but there's cream cheese in it. And I don't even know what to call it, but I call it dope.
I call it dope. So I got two quick answers. Like for straight out the box, right? It's chocolate on chocolate. I'm a chocolate on chocolate guy. But this new trend towards the birthday cake mix that they have there with all the different flavors of cake, I'm down for the birthday cake mix, man. It's unbelievable. And Sean dressed the yellow with chocolate frosting.
There's
pretty
nothing wrong
good.
with that.
The golden cake is pretty good, man. So not bad. End on cake, right? End on some cake.
Love it. All right, I yelled a lot today. I'll try and yell less next time. Hopefully, nothing in the interim pisses me off as much as that did. Because, did that maybe make me mad?
By the way, the Supreme Court issued like 14 decisions. So we only talked about 3.
Yeah, I mean the rest of them weren't all that exciting though.
Yeah, the other ones aren't that important. But Monday, there's some big decisions coming down in relation to immunity for the former president Trump and some of his cases. So we'll see how that goes. We didn't even talk about the January 6th one. We'll talk about that next week. That was a big one.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, only one of the justices' wives is flying a flag that January 6th. Anyway, it's amazing that they could decide the 2000 election in a couple days, but they couldn't decide this. It's weird. It's almost like it was intentional.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be conspiracy theory, but there is a sense to me that maybe they were waiting until after the debate to see who did what to make their decision, and because it's kind of a consensus that Trump won the debate, even though I don't know that he did anything different than he does, versus President Biden, that maybe they'll decide for President Trump because they think that that's like a bellwether for the country, and so that the country will be okay if they make the decision for Trump, where maybe if they had done it last week, they didn't. Because it does seem, particularly with the emergency abortion thing in Idaho, that they punted on making the actual decision, and they're waiting to see the political fallout from this election before they make that decision. The judges should not be doing that. That's the whole point of having an independent judiciary. They shouldn't be using political things to make their decisions. But we can talk about that more next.
Yeah, it's always interesting what they take a scalpel to and what they take just a crowbar to.
And man, did they crowbar that Chevron, man. That was a bus they drove. They drove over that thing. It is repudiated. Man, he wrote it. Man, he went to town. I feel like he's been writing that thing for years. He's been waiting to drop that bomb.
I mean, it might be it's like legislation. Maybe Clarence Thomas's Nazi-loving benefactor wrote it.
Oh no. Tom just taking shots.
All right. We should stop this before I say something even dumber.
Yeah.
That is it for This Week of This Worcester podcast this week. We will try and do better next week. We are out.